Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the latest episode of the podcast, episode number 26, where today we are going to be doing a podcast all about Valtteri Bottas, how good of a driver he is, his mistakes, his best moments, his Mercedes career, and how important his 2019 season is. Two things I need to say before I start. One, sorry that this stream has took so long to actually start. Basically, I was trying to tweet the video out, but my internet's been so slow today. It took almost 10 minutes just to do that. So sorry about that, but there's nothing I can do about that. And unfortunately, I do have some very sad and bad news to bring you. Unfortunately, guys, I cannot go to the first pre-season test because of some very bad personal stuff, or very bad stuff going on in my personal life right now, and I can't really talk about it because this thing that has been going on or is going on right now is very bad, and I can't go to the first test with this thing going on. But I'm hoping to go to the second test. But what I'll say to that is there is no guarantee that I'm actually going to go, but I'm hoping that I can go to the second test. And trust me, there is a much better chance, and there always was in the last couple of weeks, a better chance of me going to the second test than there was the first test. So sorry about that, guys, but this thing that I don't want to share because it is personal, there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm hoping to go to the second test and bring you some footage with me trackside in Barcelona. But as ever, for this podcast, I need to have someone to talk to about this topic. And as ever, it is Niblo. And Nib, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, mate. How are you yourself? Obviously, with all of the issues that we're having at the moment aside.
I'm doing well. Those internet issues we were having were very frustrating. But finally we are. Sorry about my throat, but by the way, it's very, very dry. But yeah, thank God those internet issues are fixed, and now we can finally start the podcast. And what we're going to do, guys, is first we are going to look at Valtteri Bottas's Mercedes career and how his career at Mercedes has gone. Then we'll get into his best and worst moments. Then we will get into how good of a driver we think Valtteri Bottas is, who could then succeed Bottas at Mercedes. Then we'll get into, say, our final thoughts about Valtteri. So first off, we'll start with his Mercedes career. Now, after Nico Rosberg, who won the 2016 World Championship, after he retired from the sport, Mercedes decided to go with Valtteri Bottas. Now, to be honest, they could have gone with a much better driver, but given the situation at the time, realistically, this was the only option really or the best option for Mercedes to go for, because, you know, Toto Wolff is Bottas's agent. He knows him well, and he did, prove himself a bit at Williams. So I think it was, at the time, considering how shocking of a decision it was for Rosberg to leave, I think it was the right decision for them to take on Bottas. And then in 2017, he took 3 victories in 2017, and the first half of the season for me was good enough. I thought in the first half of the season, I thought he was competitive, especially with Hamilton and Vettel, getting plenty of podiums, was right up there a lot. And for me, considering the talent that he does have, was doing well enough compared to the drivers he was competing against. And that continued as we went on to Austria and Silverstone and Hungary, and eventually continued until the end of the European season. But then, after that, I'm afraid for Bottas, things didn't really go that well for him. Because once the Asian races came around, Singapore, Malaysia and Suzuka, and then the American races, he dramatically fell off the pace. I still think it's because he was given his 2018 contract early, and I don't think he really had as much motivation to succeed as he did in the first half of the season. But it was a very alarming drop off in the last few races of 2017. He still won the final race, which is obviously a good thing. But overall for 2017, I thought it was a good enough season considering how quick the Mercedes car was and the types of drivers he was competing against. He's obviously not as good as Hamilton and Vettel, and the Mercedes and Ferrari cars were almost at times equal. So finishing third in the Drivers' Championship, which he did in 2017 for me, was a good enough result, and I thought he had a good enough season to stay at Mercedes for 2018. Nib, when it comes to Bottas's 2017, did you feel as though it was a good enough season, or did you think that he could have done a lot better?
I think the first half of the season he justified keeping his Mercedes seat, but after they come back from the mid-season break, his performances dramatically decreased. I thought he was quite awful and quite honestly not deserving of the Mercedes seat in the second half of 2017, but from the first half of 2017, he absolutely deserved the seat, and it's a similar trend to which we've seen in 2018. But I thought Bottas was actually surprisingly good in 2017. Certainly was a lot quicker than I ever suspected he would be, especially against Hamilton. He was a lot closer to Hamilton in qualifying than I ever suspected he would, considering for me, Hamilton is the second greatest qualifier of all time behind Ayrton Senna. He did a really good job against him in qualifying. But yeah, the second half of the season after Spa, he was like a half of a second off of him at every race, and it just wasn't good enough. And he certainly had to pick up his performances in the second half of the season in 2017. And I thought he did a little bit better in 2018, but obviously we will get onto that very shortly.
Yeah, we'll go on to it right now. But yeah, I think 2017 people forget that how good he was again compared to drivers that we know are much better than him. So I think he did well enough in 2017, and we'll get on to some of his best moments at Mercedes later on. But yeah, we'll go on to 2018 now. 2018 for me was a lot better of a season than people give him credit for, in my opinion. So, I mean, let's look at it. So, the first race, he was poor. The second race, I thought he did well up until the point of catching Vettel and passing Vettel. He really should have passed him. And I think he didn't do a good enough job of that. In China, he was very unlucky not to win that race. In Baku, he should have won the race. In Spain, great drive, finishing in P2. Monaco, the Mercedes car wasn't that good anyway, so P5 was okay. Canada, second, great drive. France, couldn't do anything, got took out by Vettel. Austria, got pole, was in second place in the race, then his gearbox failed, I believe. And in Silverstone, was leading the Grand Prix with about, 5 laps to go. But because he was on old tyres, he fell down the field. And when you're on old tyres, there's nothing really you can do when battling another driver on much fresher tyres and even softer tyres. And then you have Hockenheim. I thought he did very well that weekend, even though he didn't win the race. And Hungary did a great job for the team. Now, after that, I will say he wasn't that good after that. But if you look at, very similar to 2017, if you look at from the first race of 2018 until Hungary, he was clearly deserving of a seat for 2019. So I don't get why people honestly think that he was undeserving for a seat in 2019, where there were races in those first half, or in the first half of 2018, where he beat Hamilton. For example, Bahrain, Shanghai, he was going to in Baku, Canada. Yeah, qualified him in Austria. If he was maybe luckier and closer in the championship, I think he would have been allowed to fight for the race win at Hockenheim. I thought he was a very good, first half of 2018. After that, I will admit, that it wasn't that good for Bottas. There were races like Cota in Mexico where he had no real pace and, well, it seemed as though he was closer to the midfield at times than he was the top drivers in the Grand Prix. But again, you can't just look at 2 or 3 or 4 races in a 20 or 21 race season. You have to look at every Grand Prix during a season to look at whether that driver has done enough for a seat at another team or the same team for the next year. And in my opinion, Valtteri Bottas did do a good enough job to be at Mercedes for 2019. Of course, as you can see on your screen right now, this was a moment that I think did affect Bottas mentally, but I'm going to say this now. The F1 community made a big deal over something that wasn't really that big at all. It was just a very, very good plan that, worked out. Hamilton had to win that race because the championship was not officially over. And of course, the F1 community was up in arms and basically crying about it. But then, of course, they all forgot about it in a week because that's what happens with these types of things. Because it was kind of a meaningless moment in the season. I know that Hamilton still would have won the championship without this team order thing, but they had to do it just in case Ferrari struck back. And in terms of pace, they kind of did after that. Because at the US Grand Prix and the Mexican Grand Prix, they had a faster car. So they had to do it at the time. But Nib, what did you think of 2018? And do you think as well, like me, that Bottas, his first half of the season and the good performances he had in that first half of the season, do you feel as though they get overlooked?
Absolutely, they do. I honestly believe that Bottas was the better Mercedes driver in the first half of the season compared to Hamilton. I think he
Wow.
deserved to win more races than Hamilton. If you look at China, I thought he deserved to win China. He deserved to win in Baku. He deserved to win in Austria. I thought on paper, Bottas performed better than Hamilton did in the first half of the season, and that's going up to Hungary. Up until Hungary, I think Bottas was the better Mercedes driver, in all honesty. I don't think Hamilton really actually did perform that much or that well in the first half of the season. I still think we have not seen the best of Lewis Hamilton at all. I still think he hasn't put it together over a whole season, and I still believe there is absolutely more to come from Lewis Hamilton. He did really only put it together after Vettel made that mistake at Hockenheim. He just kept himself close to Vettel and then took advantage of Vettel's mistake at Hockenheim. So I definitely think Bottas's 2018 season gets overlooked. It was certainly a lot better than what people think it was. He was actually very close to Hamilton in qualifying. He out-qualified him at Bahrain, for example, which is one of Lewis's best tracks. But once again, same as 2017, the second half of the season was a massive, massive disappointment for Valtteri Bottas. He it absolutely fell apart from it at Hungary, where he just crashed into Ricardo in some very bog average driving there, and then he never really regained any form except for at Russia, of course, where, let's face it, if Hamilton hadn't bottled his qualifying lap, he would have been second, but Hamilton did, so he was on pole. We can't take that fact away from him, but I think obviously Bottas did deserve to win that race in Russia, but Mercedes had to do what they had to do. Yeah, so second half of the season was once again very disappointing by Valtteri Bottas, and coming into 2019, if he doesn't improve on that, then I do believe his seat will actually be under threat come say late November, early December this time next year.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see, what he does in the second half of next year. But it's an interesting point you bring up there compared to Lewis Hamilton. So, for example, when you say Bottas, in your opinion, was better than Hamilton the first half of the season, now people listening may think that's ludicrous to say, but if you actually look at what happened, it's not as bad or as ludicrous to say that. So, Australia, of course, Hamilton was better, but then Bahrain, Shanghai, and Baku, Bottas was the better driver. In Spain, Hamilton was better, but Bottas was in second. Monaco, I think both Mercedes drivers did well enough with the car they were given. It wasn't the best car that weekend by a mile. Canada, even though Hamilton did have reliability issues, Bottas was very good. France, Bottas was nice and competitive. Not as competitive as Hamilton, but he would have finished probably in the top two if Vettel did not take him out. At Silverstone, Bottas, people forget this, Bottas actually passed Hamilton at the start of the British Grand Prix before Hamilton got took out by Kimi Raikkonen. So it's not like Bottas gained from that. He was ahead anyway after Lewis's poor start. And Hockenheim, I'll say this again, if he was closer in the championship at that time, I think Bottas would have won that Grand Prix, because the reason after we had the whole famous, was it Valtteri, it's James thing, Bottas, after that, you'll notice Bottas then dropped off by about a second. He was doing that basically to hold up Kimi Raikkonen. I think he did have the pace to go and beat Hamilton at the end of that Grand Prix, but because of the championship situation, Mercedes did, which at the time was the best thing to do. So yeah, and then Hungary, Bottas was very good in qualifying. So yeah, I wouldn't say he was better than Hamilton in the first half of the season, but he was a lot closer to Hamilton than people give him credit for. A lot closer to Lewis Hamilton than people give him credit for. And again, if he had, and I think I said this a lot last year, if he had more luck, people would not criticise him as much as they have been, because he would have had, 3 wins, maybe 4, and people wouldn't be criticising him as much. So yeah, I have to say, a lot closer to Hamilton than people think. But guys, in the chat right now, what do you think about Bottas's Mercedes career so far? Let us know in the chat. Sorry about my throat, it's so sore. But yeah, let us know in the chat right now what you think about Bottas's Mercedes career, and also in the comments section as well. But don't forget, guys, every weekend there is not an F1 race weekend. We will be doing the podcast, so don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. On the bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or click on my channel name, go to the channel page and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for more content like this. But right, let's read out some comments when it comes to Bottas. Timmy Schnitzel, Bottas should just go alpha like Rosberg and go for it. No one will fight for him at Mercedes. If you don't bleep, you'll get bleeped. Yeah, I think he should go for it next year, because even if he does go for it and he still doesn't do in what is Toto Wolff's eyes good enough, then he's not going to, stay. So he might as well just go for it and hope that if he goes for it and is aggressive, that will be enough for him to stay at the Silver Arrows for 2020 and beyond. Because if he continues the way he's going, then he probably is going to lose his seat at the team. Right, let me just find some good comments here. Just saw one about Ricciardo and Verstappen there, but I think it's there it is. Timmy Schnitzel, same can be said for Ricciardo being better than Verstappen in the first half of the season. Verstappen finished ahead thanks to 8 mechanical failures for Ricciardo. Yeah, in the first half of 2018, yeah, I'd probably say it was equal between Ricciardo and Verstappen, because I mean, you had the first 6 races, and then you had, Canada to Hungary. Verstappen was clearly better than Ricciardo. But yeah, the mechanical failures do play a part. But I think Verstappen over the course of the season was better. But yeah, in the first half of the season, it was definitely at least equal. If not slightly in Ricciardo's favour. JB says Hungary, he just went mental and everything went downhill from then. Yeah, a bit. He did a bit. Let me just look. I'm just trying to find the best comments I can here. JB says after Canada, he was poor mostly. I think he deserved the wins at Bahrain, China, Baku, Germany, and Russia. I don't think he was poor after Canada because France qualified on the front row. Austria, pole. Silverstone was leading the Grand Prix until the very latter stages. Hockenheim really should or could have won that Grand Prix. Did a great job at Hungary to hold up Vettel and Raikkonen. I don't think he was poor after Canada most of the time. I don't think he was. Simon Cragland says he thinks Bottas is a better qualifier than a racer. I agree. I think he is. I do think he is a better qualifier, and evidence of that can be seen from his Williams days. Motorsport Tube asks, do you think you should ignore team orders? You can't, can you, really ignore team orders? But the thing is, the team orders at the time, even though it was very harsh, because it cost him the win that he was going to get that season, it had to happen. It had to happen. Right, I'll read out probably a couple more comments, and then I will go on to his best and worst moments as a Mercedes driver. Simon Cragland, Verstappen was quicker than Ricciardo. Even in the beginning of the season, Ricciardo capitalised because of Verstappen's mistakes. That's not really low luck or anything like that, is it, though? That's just Ricciardo in the first half, or the first 6 races, being the better driver. But yeah, Verstappen was faster in those first 6 races anyway. JB, I'll read this one out before we go on to the... actually, I'll read out 2 more before I go on to the next part of the podcast. JB says, Bottas doesn't have the balls like the drivers around him. He won't go for a gap like Verstappen, Ricciardo, Vettel. He needs to grow some. He does, because if he doesn't go for it and be aggressive this season, I don't see how he keeps his seat. He might as well just go for it and hope that's enough to keep his seat. But the last comment or question from the chat until we move on to the next part is from E7 Suspect, who asks, how many races do you think he must win to keep his seat for 2020? The thing is, it depends on how quick the car is. If the car, pace-wise, is as quick compared to Ferrari and Red Bull as it was last year, then I would say 3 victories for me is good enough. Because, look, he's a number 2 driver. He's not supposed to be as good as Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes knew he wasn't as good as Lewis Hamilton when they signed him. They knew that. They're not stupid. They knew he wasn't as good. So, if he gets, say, 3 wins and Hamilton gets 9 or 10, that's a good enough season for me. If I'm Mercedes, to keep that driver lineup for 2020. Because obviously it works. But if he doesn't win a Grand Prix again, but this time is he just doesn't deserve to win a race instead of being or having bad luck, then he has to go from that team. But we'll now move on, guys, to his best and worst moments as a Mercedes driver. Now, I have picked out a few interesting ones, and I'll also add, when it comes to his best moments, there's not a lot. So I picked out a few which I think go overlooked since he joined the Silver Arrows. Now, I'm going to start off with Hungary 2017. Now, I know he won at Russia and won at Austria, but I personally don't think those drives were actually that good. I think he kind of benefited from the car being good at those tracks. I don't think he was actually that good at those races. But in Hungary, at a track where Lewis Hamilton is one of the most successful drivers at that track, he outqualified him and outraced him. Now, I know you'll say Hamilton let him through on the last lap, but remember, Bottas let him through to have a go at the two Ferraris. So, you know, it equals itself out in the end, and Bottas was better than Hamilton at a track where Hamilton normally walks all over his teammates at this track. So that is one performance that I thought was very impressive from Valtteri. And another one in 2017 that I thought was very impressive was his drive in Abu Dhabi. Now, you could argue that Lewis Hamilton wasn't pushing maybe as hard as he could or trying as hard as he could, but Bottas nailed it in the entire weekend. Got pole position, got the race win, led comfortably from the front, and clearly deserved that victory. But I'll admit, in 2017, there's not many standout performances, at least in my opinion, from Bottas. There were good performances, but there wasn't really any standout performances, in my opinion, when it comes to his 2017 season. Nib, do you have any best moments for Bottas from 2017?
Well, I think for Bottas in 2017, Austria and Russia are definitely his best moments, and his more standout moments. You know, he took pole in both of those races and got the win. You know, and against Lewis Hamilton, that is no easy feat. So I think a lot of credit does have to go to Bottas for those weekends. But yeah, 2017, you know, it's Valtteri Bottas. You know, Lewis Hamilton is a different caliber of driver compared to Valtteri Bottas. And at the end of the day, anytime he outqualifies him and beats him and actually wins the race, that is an outstanding performance. So those two races, especially in Russia and Austria, massive credit has to go to Bottas there.
Also, slight correction with Russia, he started in third.
I did start third and got the slipstream. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, on the two Ferraris who started on the front row. So it was a great start by Bottas, but I see your point. But again, with Russia and Austria, I just feel as though the car helped him, and after, you know, those good starts of those races, he didn't really have to do much to hold on to the victory. But, you know, still very good moments. But there you go. And then we will move on to 2018, and the first drive in 2018 that I was very impressed by was his drive at Shanghai. Again, at a track where Lewis Hamilton is so good, he outqualified Hamilton and outraced Hamilton and deserved to win that Grand Prix. He was so good in that Grand Prix. That's one of the best performances, in my opinion, he's had at Mercedes. And you could argue against Ricciardo at the end of that Grand Prix where Ricciardo passed him in that great move. You could argue Bottas could have defended harder. He did defend pretty hard. But let's face it, guys, he did deserve to win that Grand Prix. It was took away from him because of a safety car and because the Red Bulls had the opportunity and they took it to come in for fresh, soft tyres. And that's what won Red Bull the Grand Prix. So I think Bottas did deserve to win that race. And then we have Baku, where even though he was outqualified by Lewis Hamilton, he had a very impressive Grand Prix. So it was, for most of the Grand Prix, it was Vettel leading from Hamilton second and Bottas third. Hamilton pitted for his only pit stop, then Vettel pitted, and then Bottas, trying to do the overcut, pushed like crazy, was setting some great lap times, and then the safety car came out, which, you know, was a bit lucky, but I think with the lap times he was putting in, he was going to be very close to Sebastian Vettel anyway. Then, of course, Vettel made the mistake trying to pass Bottas down the inside at turn one. But then, of course, he had that late tyre failure. But the drive he did to get into the lead, for me, was very good. And he did deserve to win that Grand Prix. And it's a shame he didn't win that Grand Prix, because if he did, then confidence-wise, he could have had even better results in the first half of the season. And another drive I want to mention as well, actually two drives, is Silverstone and Hockenheim. Now, Silverstone, he qualified in fourth and was miles off pole position, which was Lewis Hamilton. But then in the race, got up to second with a great start and was sitting pretty in second place. Then the safety car came out, Vettel pitted, Bottas stayed out, and I think Bottas did well enough defensively to keep the lead of the Grand Prix for as long as he did, because he really should not have kept the lead for as long as he did, with the amount of power the Ferrari had in a straight line and how good the Ferrari car was that weekend. So I thought that was a very impressive drive, and if Mercedes actually pitted Bottas instead of leaving him out, he could have finished, and he probably would have finished on the podium. But because they elected to keep him out, he finished in P4. And then at Hockenheim, he did a great job to qualify in the front row and was consistently in that second place for the Grand Prix, even though Kimi Raikkonen did the undercut. It was via a very early pit stop for Kimi Raikkonen. And I think Bottas would have got him anyway, and well, he did. But then after the whole Vettel crashing and Hamilton pitting and all that stuff, and the safety car, he was then told, of course, to sit behind Lewis Hamilton. Now, if, again, he was in a better championship position, I think they would have allowed him to race Hamilton, and I think he would have eventually got past because he was on much fresher tyres. But I think his car was performing better than Hamilton's. So, yeah, that was a very, in my opinion, it was a very impressive drive. And then the last impressive drive for me for Valtteri Bottas was Russia. He got the pole position and he deserved it because Hamilton made a mistake and Bottas didn't, and he put the lap in when it mattered and got the pole position, and then had a very good Grand Prix. Now, even though he let Hamilton through, we all know he was the deserving winner of the Russian Grand Prix. We know that. And I think people at Mercedes also think the same thing. Even though in the history books Hamilton has the victory, I think at Mercedes and in, just in this community, we know Bottas won that Grand Prix. So I think we can give him the plaudits for that weekend because he was the better driver that weekend, in my opinion, and did deserve the victory and was the deserving winner of that Grand Prix. And also, just to show there, at Mercedes, he has 3 race victories, 6 pole positions, 21 podiums in 41 races, I think it is, or 40. And his highest championship position is 3rd in 2017. And for me, so far, after 2 years, that is good enough for him to be driving for the Silver Arrows for 2019. Nib, for 2018, is there any other good performances that you want to shout out?
No, I think you mentioned everything. I think China was definitely very impressive. I don't think anyone expected to see him challenging Vettel after how quick Ferrari were in qualifying, and for him to be sticking with Vettel, like most of the first stint, and then obviously undercutting Vettel after Mercedes, sorry, not after Ferrari's strategic error. He did do a fantastic job in that race, and I do agree with you and with a couple of people in the comments, that definitely was, for me, his best drive of 2018. But yeah, I think you mentioned pretty much everything there.
Yeah, I don't really think there's any other that I've forgot. I was thinking Bahrain, but he should have won the race. He really should have won that Grand Prix. And he bottled it, in my opinion, so I can't give that to him. And also, I just want to mention another race that people might be saying, why haven't you talked about this? The reason I don't count Baku 2017 is because, yes, it was a great comeback drive from the back of the grid and all that, but the reason he was at the back of the grid was because he crashed into Kimi Raikkonen. So I can't say it was a good drive because he caused his own downfall and he should have been up in P2, P3 anyway. So I can't say that. Because if I say that, then I'm also going to have to say that Sebastian Vettel's drive in France in 2018 was also very good, despite him causing his own downfall. So I can't say that Bottas's drive at Baku in 2017 was a good one because he was at the back because of a stupid overtaking attempt on Kimi Raikkonen. But now, let's get into his worst moments at Mercedes, or say his worst drives at Mercedes. Let's get into that right now. So the first one was in his second race as a Mercedes driver at China, where he was, I think, running in second or third place after the safety car came out because of a crash for Antonio Giovinazzi. And then under the safety car, had a very silly spin and dropped almost to the back of the grid and cost himself what would have been a podium finish. And it was a very poor mistake by Bottas. And yeah, you can't really forgive mistakes like that. It was so simple for a driver like him. And then another very poor drive in my opinion, and I'm going to say this drive was one of, if not the worst drive of his entire Formula 1 career. His drive at Malaysia in 2017. So he started the Grand Prix in 4th. He should have qualified higher because the Mercedes car was good enough for at least P3 on the grid that day. Kimi Raikkonen had his issue on the starting grid, so he went up a position, tried to get past Verstappen, he didn't, then fell miles behind, got passed by Ricciardo very easily, then got passed by Vettel, who started at the back and was dropping back so far and wasn't even that far ahead of Sergio Perez at the time in the Force India. It was such a poor drive, so poor, and for me, that is his worst drive in Formula 1. It was so bad, and even he admits that that was such a bad drive. And yeah, that's really it for 2017. But then when we go on to 2018, you then have the first race of the season where he crashed in qualifying and I think cost Mercedes the race win overall, because if he had qualified where he would have probably qualified, which is P2 for that Grand Prix, the whole virtual safety car or safety car thing wouldn't have happened because they would have had 2 cars at the front instead of just the one in Lewis Hamilton, and they would have had better protection against Ferrari in a safety car situation like what happened. Yeah, he bottled it in qualifying. And then in the race, despite having a car that was so much faster, he really struggled to get through the pack. Really struggled. He barely got past the Force Indias and the McLaren of Van Dorn. It was a massive struggle for Bottas, and he should have done better. He should have finished that Grand Prix in at least P5, but ended up finishing in P8 and didn't really go anywhere in that Grand Prix, in my opinion. And then another poor drive that I want to talk about is Monza in 2018. The reason this was so poor was because, so at the start, you had the whole Hamilton-Vettel contact. Vettel dropped to the back, but Bottas lost position to Verstappen at the start. Now, we know, especially last year, that Mercedes at that track are way faster than Red Bull. Even a driver of Max Verstappen's quality can't seriously compete with those cars at that track. But he did such a poor job in trying to pass Verstappen. It was such a poor race, and I still think to this day that the penalty Verstappen got was unfair because Bottas kind of drove into his tyre, not the other way round. And I think Bottas's drive that weekend was very poor. He should have been better. I know he helped Hamilton to win that Grand Prix because he held Kimi Räikkönen up, but he should have done better. He really should have done better. He should have beat Verstappen on track. He really should have beat Max Verstappen on track. It was so poor. And then the last real bad race for Bottas that I could really think of is his drive at Brazil in 2018. So, he qualified in third, got a great start, got up to second place. The Mercedes car at Brazil wasn't the fastest car in qualifying or the race, in my opinion, but it was good enough to be, on the podium. But Bottas was so slow in that Grand Prix. He was holding up Verstappen, Vettel, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, even Charles Leclerc wasn't that far off that group of drivers. He was only 2.5 seconds off in the Sauber because of how slow Valtteri Bottas was. That's how poor Bottas was pace-wise in that Grand Prix. And that has to go down as one of his worst drives, maybe of his career, but definitely at Mercedes. Nib, are there any other drives that you can think of that were really poor? And also, what do you think of those drives by Bottas and how poor they were?
Well, one race which I don't know if you left this out on purpose for me just to go on a rant about was, of course, Hungary in 2018. He was so bad in that race. He was absolutely miles off Hamilton. And then his racecraft in that race was absolutely awful, just crashing right into the side of Ricardo. Both drivers very lucky not to crash out of the race in that incident which they had at turn one. Then eventually, because Bottas had so much damage, Ricardo eventually got past him. But yeah, Brazil, I didn't actually remember that until you mentioned, but he was very poor at Brazil. Everyone was just behind him. He had a little trolley train behind him. It was it was reminiscent of those days. Um, yeah, and with the couple of other races which you mentioned, I also agree that he was very poor at. Australia, I know from actually watching and being there, it was so hard to overtake, and is such a hard track to overtake because yeah, you might close up to them on the main straight, the Walker Straight, but then into turn one and two, trying to keep the momentum through there in the dirty air, going through down into turn three on the DRS straight is very difficult. So getting P8 in Australia is a poor result, but actually quite a good result considering how quite difficult it is to overtake in these cars at Australia. But yeah, there was a couple of races there which I definitely agree with you that he was very poor.
I see what you mean with Australia, but still, the car was so much faster than like the Renault and the McLaren, the Force India. I think he could have. I think he could have done a better job. And if it was Lewis Hamilton, I know we can't compare the two because obviously Hamilton is better. But
Yeah.
if it was Lewis Hamilton, I think Hamilton would have at least finished in fifth. But I see your point. But
Yeah, that's the thing. He's not Lewis Hamilton.
yeah,
That's the issue here.
yeah. If it was a better driver, maybe he would have finished in P5. But I think he could have done a bit better, especially after the safety car. Now that everyone ahead closed up to him. Especially Hulkenberg, Verstappen, Alonso, drivers like that. But I see your point, but still, it was a poor weekend for Valtteri Bottas. And now I want to know from you guys, are there any other best or worst drives from Bottas that you can think of? And what do you think of those ones that I've picked? Let me know in the chat right now and also in the comments section, and I'll read out as many as I can before we move on to talking about how good of a driver Valtteri Bottas is in the grand scheme of things, and how he compares to the current crop of drivers such as Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Leclerc, all of those drivers. We'll get into that in just a moment, but I want to just see what you guys think in the chat. Timmy says, the mental cost of being called a wingman by your team boss and stand down orders from your trusted engineers being understated. Racing is all about confidence. I will agree that that didn't help him, but he was already mentally destroyed anyway, because by the time you got to Hockenheim, even before the whole Valtteri it's James thing, he'd been cost the win in Shanghai by a safety car, then by a tyre failure in Baku, and then probably at least a top 2 finishing position in Austria, and also a top 2 finishing position in France. I think after Austria, he was mentally destroyed. So I don't think those things had as much damage on Bottas as those things did, because it seemed as though for Bottas, anything he did didn't work. And when that happens, that's going to destroy a driver's confidence. Andrew Drury says he was rubbish in Austin as well in both 2017 and 2018. The reason I didn't mention that was because if you look at his performances at that track, historically Bottas is not good at that track. It's not a good Valtteri Bottas circuit. So that's why I didn't mention it, because he doesn't like that track anyway. And that's why I didn't mention Monaco either, because that's another track that Bottas just is not good at. Halam says Bottas is a midfield driver for a reason. Right, let me just look at some more comments. Right, just trying to find the best ones I can. Simon Cragland agreeing that his best drive was in China. And they're saying Vettel driver of the day in France. Lol, I still don't get why he was driver of the day when he caused his own downfall. I don't get that. Simon True, Bottas was poor with looking after his tyres. Yes, he was. He was very poor, and he has to work on that for 2019. But the one positive for him is that the tyres are harder and more durable for 2019, so that will help his own performance. Right, let me just read out a couple more, I think. Hello to Ronan Brady, who I know will have plenty to say on Valtteri Bottas, because every time I talk about Bottas, he starts to mention just how poor of a driver he thinks he is. And no problem. Just saying this. Sorry, I haven't been around much lately. No problem. The season basically is getting underway about now. And also, I will, at the end of this podcast, I will let you guys know what the plan is for next week and content on the channel next week. Because now, obviously, if you didn't hear, sadly, I can't go to the first preseason test because of some very bad personal issues in my personal life. So I can't go to the first preseason test. So I will talk about, what's going to go down on the channel next week, and also tomorrow, because I don't think I am going to do This Week in F1 tomorrow, because I don't think there is enough news to actually do that. Ronan Brady saying the winter break has calmed me down about Bottas. I hope it has. Timmy says Canada seems to be a Bottas track. Yes, it does. He qualified third there in the 2013 Williams. Has had a podium, I think, three times at Canada. Oh, not 3 times, 4 times at Canada. Yeah. 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018. Yeah, 4 times in a row. He's had a podium at Canada. Right, I'll read out a couple more. I can find some good ones, and then I'll move on to the next part. JB says, I think Ocon will go to Mercedes in 2019. I don't know if he means 2019 or 2020. I don't know. Hopefully he can clarify. Bottas will return to Williams as Kubica will be dropped after 1 season at Williams. If you mean 2020, then yeah, that is a possibility. But for 2019, I'm not sure about that. Right. Let me find one more. And then I will move on. Halam says, I have a feeling if Carlos Sainz does bad at McLaren, Bottas could go there. Never really thought of that. But I'll keep that in mind in case that does happen. But we'll move on to the next part of this podcast, which is about how good of a driver is Valtteri Bottas. So in 2013, he had his first season in F1 in a Williams car that was basically at the back of the grid. Was very poor. They didn't fix the car properly until the last couple races, I think. And yeah, it was a very poor season for Williams, so we couldn't really do anything about that. But then in 2014, Williams had the second fastest car, I would say, over the course of 2014. And I think he did a good enough job in that car in 2014. And also, after that, in 2015 and 2016. Now, when he was signed to Mercedes, I thought he could be just as good, if not slightly more competitive than Rosberg. Because honestly, guys, I thought Bottas was a slightly better driver than Nico Rosberg. I didn't rate Rosberg that highly, and I still don't rate Rosberg that highly.
What
but
did you just say?
How's that a bad thing to say? But I'm saying...
Alright, well, we'll get into that shortly.
After 2014, 2015 and 2016, I thought Bottas was on Rosberg's level, if not slightly better, because you have to remember, 2014, the Williams car was very fast in a straight line and didn't really have that much aero. In 2015, it was pretty much the same, and then in 2016, it was not competitive with the Mercedes car. And I thought he did a good enough job in that car in those 3 seasons. And again, I didn't at the time rate Rosberg that highly, and I still don't. I don't think Bottas is, after the 2 seasons I've seen, I don't think now Bottas is better than Rosberg. But at the time when he was announced as Rosberg's replacement, I thought he was on his level, if not slightly better. And well, Nib, what did you think then of Bottas when he was signed to Mercedes? Did you think he could be competitive with Hamilton? What did you think of how good of a driver he was after those 4 years at Williams?
Well, I think at Williams he proves himself as a fairly competitive midfield driver. I don't think he's anything more. I don't think he's any less. He is nowhere near the level of Nico Rosberg. I am sorry, but Nico Rosberg is a lot better than Valtteri Bottas. I'm not getting you. I'm not allowing you to get away with that. I don't know how on earth you thought Bottas was anywhere near the level of Nico Rosberg. Nico Rosberg could out-qualify Hamilton, on the odd occasion, not just at 2 tracks, not just 3 tracks, and then actually beat him in the races. Valtteri Bottas can't do that, and yeah, I don't quite understand how you think Rosberg is better than Bottas. So if you want to explain yourself a little bit more, then go ahead.
Well, look, you have to, before he actually joined Mercedes and raced against Hamilton, I didn't know yet how good Bottas really was, but I was basically guessing based on how quick the Williams car was compared to the car Rosberg was driving. I was kind of guessing as to how good Bottas was, and I thought he was on his level, if not slightly better, at the time. But obviously, after 2017 and 2018, it's been clearly proven that Bottas is not as good as Nico Rosberg was. But before he joined Mercedes, I thought he was on that level. I really did. I thought he did a good enough job.
Well, I'm quite stunned by that. But yeah, I think there was no one really else who Mercedes could go with for this seat. He did he out of anyone else on the grid who was actually able to go into the seat, he did deserve the seat. So I will give Bottas the benefit of the doubt that he did deserve this Mercedes seat more than anyone else on the grid who was actually able to go into the seat. If you guys know what I mean, but I honestly think Bottas has done a lot better of a job than I ever expected him to do at Mercedes. He's proved to me that he's actually slightly more than a midfield driver, that he's probably just a level in between the top class drivers and then a midfield driver. So I think Bottas has actually quite proved himself at Mercedes, and credit to the guy. It's not an easy job having Lewis Hamilton as your teammate. And he, in all honesty, he has done a fairly good job against him for a driver of his caliber. And if he can just put a whole season together, who knows? He could actually challenge Hamilton somewhat over a whole season.
What was it? I also want to ask this. What was it exactly that made you think from his Williams days that he was, say, a midfield driver? Because honestly, I thought he was better than a midfield driver. I wouldn't say a top driver. I don't think he's ever been a top driver, but I'd say in between top and midfield. Was a season where you thought actually he's not that good?
No, there wasn't. There wasn't this like a moment where I thought, okay, this guy is rubbish at all. Yeah, like he was always more towards the top end of the midfield, but he was just unproven. For me, he had to be proven, and I think he has proven that over the last couple of years. So yeah.
Okay. I will say as well, there were races where he was quite comfortably beaten by Felipe Massa. Now, that when it comes to that, it really depends on what you think of Felipe Massa when he was at Williams. I don't think Massa, after his crash at Hungary in 2009, I don't think he lost as much pace as people think. He definitely did lose something, but he didn't lose as much as people think, because if you compare Massa to Alonso at Ferrari after that, he wasn't as good before as Alonso, so he wasn't going to be after. That's just my opinion. And he wasn't as good as Bottas in those 3 years at Williams, but he did have races where he really comfortably beat Bottas. So I never thought he was a top driver, but I thought he could, do a good job in a Mercedes, in a Ferrari, or, a seat like that. And then, once he got to Mercedes, again, as I said a minute ago, he was kind of proven to be, in my opinion, not as good as I thought, but not a midfield driver like some people think. He's not a top driver again. For me, he's in that middle tier between top and midfield. I don't think he will ever contend for the World Championship, even if he stays at Mercedes until 2021 or 2022. I never think he's going to contend for the championship because I don't think he is good enough, but he doesn't need to be good enough. We know he's not as good as Lewis Hamilton, and he is going to be the number 2 in that team. So he doesn't have to be contending for the World Championship to be successful at that team. Rubens Barrichello at Ferrari was a success, and he never contended for the World Championship. So you don't need to contend for the championship, even if you are in a good enough car to do so, to be a success at a team. So for me, even though I have been at times disappointed by what Bottas has shown us, he is still for me, I wouldn't say a midfield driver, but he is still for me a pretty good driver. A pretty good driver. I wouldn't say as good as drivers like Vettel or Hamilton or Verstappen or Ricciardo. I think on the grid, he's probably the, I don't know, 7th, 8th, 9th best driver on the grid, something like that. You'd have to have a very impressive 2019 to really go up in those standings for me. But yeah, I'd say 7th, 8th, 9th as in terms of who's the best on the grid. Nib, compared to the drivers he's competing against, and just the grid in general, how good of a driver is Valtteri Bottas compared to Hamilton, Vettel, Verstappen, Ricciardo, Raikkonen, Leclerc, and even the midfield drivers?
Yeah, so I'll go through driver by driver who Bottas is well, this sounds very harsh, worse than. So I don't think he's better than Hamilton. He's not better than Vettel, Raikkonen, Ricciardo, Verstappen, Leclerc. Who haven't I said? I'd even say Hulkenberg. Um,
I'm not sure
yeah,
about
see,
that.
that's a very tricky one for me. Him and Hulkenberg. I'd love to see them closer, like in a very similar car, not in the same team, but in a similar car to see who was better than them. I still think that's very close, but he's certainly not better than any other of the of like the top drivers. In well, compared to last season, I think he's better than Gasly. I'll give him that. I think he's better than Pierre Gasly, but he's not better than Ricardo, Verstappen, Kimi, Leclerc, Vettel, Hamilton. I think he's 7th or 8th in that. But I really would like to see him and Hulkenberg have a really good battle to see who is like in that little gap between the midfield as the best driver.
I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Nico Hulkenberg. I think he is overrated in the F1 community. I actually would say, I think Sergio Perez could. They've never really been in a similar enough car, but I think Sergio Perez is maybe slightly better than Bottas, in my opinion. I've been more impressed by Perez's career than Bottas, because Perez has never really been, or he never has been in a top car or a car that can consistently go for podiums. He's had, at best, the 4th fastest car in a season. Bottas had, for 2 seasons, the 2nd and 3rd fastest car. So, yeah, I'd say Perez, I think, is better than Bottas. I do agree. I think Bottas is better than Gasly. I don't think Gasly's that good, to be honest, but we'll see. Hopefully he does prove us wrong. But yeah, I don't think Hulkenberg's better. I don't get the whole Hulkenberg hype at all. I just think he's a midfield driver, and people will say, oh, he's unlucky with podiums and stuff like that. He's not. He just hasn't been good enough to get one. When he's had the opportunity, he's bottled it. So I think Perez, I would say, definitely on Bottas's level, if not slightly better. And it's a shame that Sergio Perez can't be in a top car, because I think people would really be surprised by how good of a driver he is, especially in the races. He's a very, very good driver, and it's such a shame that when he went to McLaren, they went from a top team to a midfield team. It is a big shame. But let me know right now, guys, in the chat and also the comment section, how good is Valtteri Bottas in your opinion, and how many drivers are better than Valtteri Bottas? Let me know in the chat and in the comment section as well. And also, just to let you guys know, if you're new to the channel, we do this every weekend. There is not an F1 race on a weekend. So don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. On the bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or click on my channel name, go to the channel page and subscribe to the channel.
Well, just before we get into the comments, I must say between Perez, Hulkenberg, and Bottas, for me, it is very close. I'm not saying Hulkenberg's, a top driver. I'm definitely not saying that, but he is in the top echelon of the midfield drivers with Perez, in my opinion. So it definitely would be interesting to see how Bottas, Perez, and Hulkenberg would compete within each other in a similar sort of car.
They're definitely in the same bracket. There's no doubt about that. Also, Grosjean, Magnussen, they're in that same bracket. Ocon.
If they were more consistent.
If they're more consistent. I think Romain Grosjean honestly does have the pace to be better than all of them, but he's not consistent enough.
Yes.
Just look at 2015 where he was so good in that Lotus, which was not that good of a car. And he got that podium at Spa, which is one of the best drives that I've seen since I started watching Formula 1. It's a great drive by Grosjean, but yeah, you got what? Perez, Bottas. Would we say, I guess we're going to say Gasly as well, is in that midfield driver bracket.
Oh, well, Gasly's a midfield driver, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
But he's certainly not better than Bottas.
You got Hulkenberg, Grosjean, Magnussen, Ocon. Who have I forgot?
I think
Kvyat.
Bottas is better than Ocon, and then Ocon.
We'll get on to Ocon in a minute, but yeah. For now, I'm going to say Bottas is better, but you also got Kvyat, who, similar to Grosjean, on his day, is one of the fastest drivers in that midfield, but his day doesn't come around too often. Right, let me read out a few comments to see what some of you guys think. Very interested to see what you think. Right, let me just look. Ronan Brady asks, do you think he is better than what Kovalainen was? Yes, I think he is. I think he's better than Kovalainen. Kovalainen wasn't... It's weird with Kovalainen because if you look at his first season at Renault, he wasn't that good. And then when he went to McLaren, he was actually better than I thought he would be quality-wise, even though I wasn't watching F1 at the time. If you look at his driving quality compared to Lewis Hamilton, it wasn't actually that bad. But when he was at Renault in 2007, he wasn't that good, even though he finished on the podium in Japan in 2007. The moment you start comparing him with Lewis's performance, your argument starts to fall apart. He needs to improve. You can't compare him to Lewis Hamilton. Lewis is clearly the better driver, no doubt about that. Right, let me just look for some comments. Simon Cragland, Perez would also be a very good second driver, but not more than that. I agree, but I think he is better than Bottas. It is close, but I think he is better. And I would take Perez if I was a team principal and I had a number 1 and number 2 driver policy, which I would have. Perez would be my number 2 driver, next to someone like a Verstappen or a Hamilton or something like that. Timmy says Gasly is unproven and way too young. Red Bull didn't want to promote him due to inexperience. Their hand was forced. Well, I actually made the comparison a couple of weeks ago that I think the Gasly situation, in terms of him being promoted to Red Bull, is similar to the Kvyat one, where when Vettel left, they had to put Kvyat in the car. They didn't really have a choice. And it's the same with this. When Ricciardo left, their only choice was Pierre Gasly, really. And I think they, if they could have, they would have waited for, say, a better young driver or something like that. Right, let me find a couple more. Then we'll get on to who could succeed Bottas in that drive and what we think of them. Get onto that in a moment. Right, just trying to find a couple more. Gina saying yes, Hulkenberg versus Ricciardo will be epic. I don't think it'll be as epic as you think. Sergio Perez will be the best of the rest in 2019, says Tonka Toy Truck. I do think Racing Point in 2019 will be better than they were when they were Force India, of course. Last year, I think they will be better and they'll be a lot stronger. But I don't think they'll finish 4th in the Constructors. Ronan Brady, Perez should have got the 2017 seat or Pascal Wehrlein. With Wehrlein, I agree with Mercedes not giving him the seat because he hadn't proved himself enough. Even though he did do very well in the manor, they needed more, to see if he was good enough. So I agree with them not giving him the seat, but he should be in F1. No doubt about that. Tonka Toy Truck. But Ocon did keep pace with Perez at Force India. Well, if you're touted to be a great driver in the future and be up there with Max Verstappen and be going to Mercedes, I would hope you could be as good as Sergio Perez, if not better. Right, one more comment and then I'll move on. And the last one before we go on is from Timmy. Grosjean has improved greatly since his crash Stappen days. Well, he had that in 2018 in the first half of the season, so he still has that in him, unfortunately. And that's why I can't say he is, in the midfield driver bracket, one of the best drivers because he's not consistent enough. Pace-wise, I think he's probably the quickest in that midfield bracket, but you need to look at pace and also what he does in the races as well to determine how good of a driver he is. But we'll now move on to the next part, which is looking at who could succeed Bottas at Mercedes. And the favourite is Esteban Ocon, who of course is not driving in 2019. It looks as though he will be driving for Mercedes in 2020. Now, look, I am an Ocon fan. I do like Ocon. I think Ocon absolutely deserves to be in Formula 1 for 2019 at Racing Point, but I have not seen enough evidence to suggest that he is good enough to be driving for a top team. He hasn't done enough. He hasn't had a podium. And I know some of you will say, well, he's in a Force India, but look at 2017 and 2018, and at certain races, he had a good enough car to get a podium given the circumstances. For example, Baku, both years. And he did not beat Sergio Perez in 2 seasons, and Perez had more retirements, I think, than Ocon. So how can you give Ocon that seat? I don't see how you can. I don't think he has done enough. What he had to do, and I did a video on Bottas on my old channel, and I said what Ocon needed to do if he wanted a Mercedes seat for 2019 or 2020 or whenever. He had to beat Perez and he had to get a podium. He did neither. So how can you give him a seat? He hasn't done enough to deserve a seat. He hasn't done enough. I don't see how he has done enough. And I will say as well, I don't get the I guess the hype around Ocon. Again, he is a good driver, but he's not as good as Max Verstappen. Come on, he's not as good as Leclerc or Vettel or Hamilton. Because if he was, he would have beat Sergio Perez. Perez for me is a good driver, but if you're going to be a top driver, you have to beat a Sergio Perez level of driver. And I know people out there will say, well, he's out-qualified him. You can't only look at qualifying to determine who is the better driver. Because in that case, Pastor Maldonado should still be an F1. And Romain Grosjean is still a very, very good driver, when he's probably at best a good driver. You see my point? You can't just look at qualifying. To determine who is a better driver in the same team, you must look at qualifying and the race combined, and how their pace is delivered through qualifying and the races. You can't just look at qualifying, because you will find yourself becoming a hypocrite if you only look at one thing, and then you say another driver is better than another driver at another team, when your judgment at just looking at qualifying, for example, is hypocritical. For example, at Williams, I believe Sergei Sorokin outqualified Lance Stroll, but in the races, Stroll was better. Now, I do think Sorokin was better than Stroll, but I will say it was very close. But if you look at the, qualifying and the races, in terms of their pace in qualifying and the races, for me, Sorokin was ever so slightly the better driver. But it's still very close, but was slightly the better driver. But when it comes to Perez and Ocon, yes, Ocon is the faster driver when it comes to qualifying, but that doesn't mean you're the better driver. Because when it came to the races, Perez was easily better than Ocon. Look at Spa, for example, in 2018. So you had Ocon qualifying third and Perez fourth, and that amazing end to that session. And then Perez comfortably beat him in the race, finishing P5 ahead of Ocon in P6. That pretty much describes why Sergio Perez is better than Ocon. Yes, Ocon will outqualify Perez, but in the races, Perez tends to most of the time beat Ocon. And I do think Perez is better than Ocon, and I think 2 seasons, or after 2 seasons, if you don't beat a driver in the same team, you can't say you're better. I'm sorry, you can't say you're better. You've had enough time to beat them. You cannot come out and say that you are the better driver. But right, after that rant, I guess, Nib, what do you think of Ocon? Do you think he is good enough to be at Mercedes? Do you think that he is a top driver? And do you think that he has done enough for a drive at a top team?
Well, let's just start off with this. I love Esteban Ocon. He should be in Formula One. He's not a top driver. I don't think he would be an upgrade on Valtteri Bottas, in my opinion. Sergio Perez has beaten him over the past 2 seasons. I do think it was a very, very close between him and Perez in 2018. And, oh man, it was so close between these two. They were even close in 2017, and I think it was even closer in 2018. But Sergio Perez has said this, and I think it's a very fair point. If Ocon is being talked about getting the Mercedes seat, why isn't Perez being talked about getting the Mercedes seat? Perez has beaten him in the last 2 seasons, and I think it is quite unfair on Sergio Perez that Esteban Ocon is being linked to this Mercedes seat so much, when Sergio Perez has beaten him the last 2 seasons. It's actually
It's ridiculous.
It is quite ridiculous. I don't think Ocon actually does deserve this seat at Mercedes. If he had another year to prove himself and he did something, ridiculous and awesome, then yeah, absolutely, you deserve the Mercedes seat. But no, after sitting out a year, through honestly no fault of his own, I don't think he is good enough to just go straight into that Mercedes seat, taking Bottas's seat, when honestly I see them as a similar caliber of driver. I do think Bottas is probably better than Ocon, in my opinion, just because Bottas is that little bit older. He is probably a little bit wiser than Ocon. So I definitely don't think it should be Esteban Ocon, who should be replacing Valtteri Bottas at Mercedes for 2020. That is for sure.
I'll also say, when it comes to this whole Perez-Ocon thing, the reason that Perez doesn't get talked about is because of 2013, and that is absolute BS, because that McLaren car was not a top car. But there are so many idiots out there that go on about, oh, well, he had his chance at a top team. They weren't a top team. They had the 5th fastest car, and they were lucky to beat Force India at times. I don't get how people can honestly say he had his chance. It was basically a sideways move. He went from a Sauber car that could get on the podium and did, to McLaren who, well, they didn't get on the podium, so maybe it was a backward step in terms of the pace of the car. I don't get how people say that when that McLaren was a midfield car. It was clearly a midfield car. They were nowhere near Red Bull, Lotus, Mercedes or Ferrari. They were not a top team. They did not have the pace to get on the podium or even in the top 5 in really any Grand Prix. The only reason they got a top 5 finish was because of luck. I don't get how people say he has had his chance. No, he hasn't. He has not driven yet a car that is good enough to be winning races or consistently challenging for a podium. He has not had his chance. He hasn't. And if Ocon does get his chance and Perez doesn't, then that's just more BS for me, because Perez has beaten him for the last 2 seasons. I don't get it. And I'm hoping that Racing Point, with the backing of the Stroll family, maybe do become a top team, because then Perez will get what he deserves, which is to have a car that can consistently go for a podium, which he deserves, because he's had 10 podiums almost in his career, I think, in midfield cars that don't deserve to be on the podium. So I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. It's such hypocrisy and BS that people come up with sometimes about Perez and Ocon and stuff like that. I'm probably going to do a video when it comes to this whole Ocon thing eventually, and Perez and what I think about him after his 2018 and stuff like that. But I don't see how you could possibly say that Ocon has deserved or has done enough to be at Mercedes for 2020. I don't see it. Please tell me if you disagree with me in the comments or the chat. Tell me what he's done to deserve that drive. And if it's, well, he's better than Bottas, I'm afraid that's not really a good enough point, because if you really don't rate Bottas, then you should be going out for a driver who's a lot better, who can compete with Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, I'm hoping, I'll be honest, I'm kind of hoping Bottas has a really good season, because I don't think Ocon does deserve that seat. So I don't want Ocon to get that seat, because I don't think he is deserving. And if Ocon goes into that team, I think he'll get destroyed by Lewis Hamilton, and people's rating or ranking of him will go down a lot when it comes to Esteban Ocon. But another person who could, if he has a very good 2019 in what is likely to be a back marker car, or back of the midfield, say, car, is the Formula 2 champion of 2018, George Russell. If this guy has an impressive 2019, maybe gets a few surprise points finishes in a car that maybe is not good enough, this guy could take that seat away from Esteban Ocon. And I really like this guy. I really do, because he's had a very impressive junior Formula career. He's proven he was better, or he is better than some drivers that he's competed against, such as Lando Norris and Alexander Albon and Nick de Vries and drivers like that. Well, very good drivers, of course. And I think that he can, if he does have an impressive enough 2019 and Bottas does not perform enough in 2019, I would not be surprised if Russell is in that seat in 2020. I would not be surprised. But he has to absolutely drive the wheels off that car, and hopefully he does. But Nib, what do you think about Russell? Do you think he can get into that seat for 2020 if he has a very impressive year, or do you think it's really between Ocon and Bottas?
I do see George Russell having a better opportunity of getting in that seat compared to Esteban Ocon because he actually has an opportunity to see himself. Do I think both any of them deserve to get in that seat? I mean, unless Russell has an absolutely ridiculous Leclerc level season,
Yeah.
then no, I don't believe he deserves a seat. And I agree with what you said before. I do hope Bottas has a good season because he absolutely deserves it after the bad luck that he had in 2018. Obviously, that's the sport. That's just what happens. But I do hope that Bottas does have a good 2019 because, quite honestly, out of anyone else that Mercedes can probably have, I think he's probably one of the best around. Maybe you could go for a little upgrade with a Sergio Perez or a Nico Hulkenberg, in my opinion. Maybe, you don't agree on that as we discussed earlier, but I think George Russell is a very good young driver. I he was absolutely the class of the field in F2 last year, but it is yet to be seen how he will perform in a Formula One car. We will see in a couple of weeks' time, and in just over, 5 weeks' time now when it comes to the Australian Grand Prix. Yep, I was doing the calculations in my head there. Um, in 5 weeks' time at the Australian Grand Prix, of course. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does against Robert Kubica, and if he absolutely blows him out the water and has a Leclerc level season, then yeah, perhaps he can come in instead of Bottas, but it will certainly be a major risk of Mercedes putting in such a young driver in to one of the top teams in the sport.
Yeah, it would be a risk. It would, but as you said, if he has a Leclerc level season in a car that is basically, I don't know, eighth, ninth, even 10th fastest on the grid, you've got to put him in the car, surely, ahead of Ocon. But we'll of course have to see. But guys, what do you think about Ocon and Russell? Put in the chat right now what you think about these drivers. And also, please let me know, when it comes to Esteban Ocon, what has he done? If you do think he is deserving of that seat, what has he done to deserve that seat, in your opinion? And also in the comment section, put in there as well what you think he has done to deserve that seat. Let me know right now. And I'll read out some before we come to the end of this topic about Valtteri Bottas. Will F1 says it seems that Toto Wolff wants Ocon to be in the Mercedes for 2020, as he seems to feel sorry that he has not had a seat this year, even though Ocon is not quite as good as Bottas. I don't think you can give the driver a seat because you feel sorry for him. I don't think you can do that. You got to do it based on merit, based on what they actually have done. NN says Perez is the best non-top driver on the grid, so I guess you're saying midfield, and Ocon has been very competitive with him, so he has the quality to be a second driver in a top team. Yes, but if you're going to replace Bottas, Mercedes can't replace him with someone who is potentially worse or the same as Bottas. If you're going to replace a driver, you've got to upgrade. You can't downgrade unless it's, a Lewis Hamilton or a Michael Schumacher level of driver. You have to upgrade on the driver that you're replacing. You can't downgrade. And if you're going to bring in Ocon or Perez, well, actually, not Perez, because I think Perez is a slight upgrade. But if you're going to bring in Ocon, there's no point, because I don't think Ocon has actually proved that he is an upgrade on Valtteri Bottas. NN says they had the chance to upgrade with Ricciardo. They didn't. Yeah, they could have done that, but I think they wanted to give Bottas another season. I think Lewis as well likes Bottas at the team. So that played a part. Will F1 says, didn't he say something about guaranteeing Ocon a seat? That is what makes me think that Toto might feel for Ocon. I hope that's not why he gets a seat, because he feels sorry for him. I really hope that's not the case. Simon Cragland says, I do disagree with you. Ocon did outrace Perez when they could be compared, and I think he is good enough to be Hamilton's number 2 like Bottas. I don't think he outraced Perez. I think Perez is the better racer. And I would prefer, if I was a team principal, I would prefer a driver who is a better racer than a qualifying driver. Because points is what you need. You don't need, a great qualifying and then rubbish races or not as good races, which Bottas seems to have. Right, let me find a couple more comments. Let me take a look. Just trying to find a couple more. Gina says Mercedes will keep Bottas. Right, hold on. I'm just looking for one more, then we'll move on to the end of this topic. Based on stats, he did outrace Perez. Well, if he did, then why did he finish behind in the championship? There you go. And I think when I went back and looked at it, if you take away, or if you count the points they would have got, both Perez and Ocon, without bad luck. So, for example, if Perez had finished in Mexico and Ocon had finished in Spain and, stuff like that, Perez would have beat him still. So, yeah. Jeffrey Guyot says, I haven't seen anything from Ocon that shows that he is ready for a top team seat. I'm the same. I haven't seen enough. I haven't seen enough. But I think now we'll move on to the end of this topic. And, well, for 2019, it's pretty simple. Valtteri Bottas has to improve. Not massively, because if he massively improves, then he's probably going to be on Lewis Hamilton's level. But let's be honest, he's never going to be. So I think he is only going to improve a little bit if he does improve. And he only really has to improve a little bit if he gets, depending on the car, the pace of the car, if he gets 3 or 4 race wins, a load of podiums and finishes in the top 3 in the championship, or even top 4, depending on the pace of the Mercedes compared to the Ferrari and the Red Bull, for me, that is good enough for a seat in 2020. Nib, what does Bottas, in your opinion, in terms of how many race wins does he need to get and where does he need to finish in the championship for him to deserve to stay at that team for 2020?
Well, in terms of Bottas needing to perform to stay at Mercedes for 2020, I don't think there's a number of races that he needs to win. I think that's unfair because, Lewis Hamilton could be absolutely outrageous for 20 out of 20 of the races, So I think it's for Bottas, he has to just be close to Hamilton. He has to be within a couple of tenths to Hamilton, picking up the points consistently, beating Hamilton on the occasion, like he was doing in the first half of 2018. That's why he got the contract for 2019, of course. But for me, he needs to pick up his performance in the second half of the season after Belgium, Hungary. He needs to keep up his performance. It seems as if he can't keep up with Hamilton after those races. He needs to really, really step up his game there. He seems to always be outqualifiable by Lewis by like half a second, 3/10. And if you're at a top team, that's not really good enough to be outqualified by that sort of margin by your teammates. So Bottas does really need to pick up his game second half of the season. And that's where I'm looking at in particular for him to improve in 2019. But to be at Mercedes in 2020, he honestly just has to do exactly the same as as he did in 2018 at the start of the season. He obviously needs a bit more luck on his side because he would have won at least 2 races if he had a little bit more luck on his side. So I think that's all really Bottas has to do, is to maintain what he did in 2018 and probably be a little bit better.
I will say, I was thinking about it when you were talking then. If he has an identical season to what Kimi Räikkönen had in 2018, that should be good enough. I mean, what Kimi had, was it 10 or 11 podiums and a race win? That should be good enough. If the car
had
is
more podiums than Sebastian.
Exactly. I don't think Hamilton will have a Vettel like 2018, but if he does if Bottas has a podium in half of the races and has a couple race wins, I think that should be enough. If the Mercedes car, though, is... Say they dominate 2019. I don't think they will, but say they dominate 2019, then he should win at least 4 races or something like that. But I don't think they will. But yeah, that's what I think he has to do. And that's also what Nib thinks he has to do for 2019 to keep a seat at Mercedes. But guys, let us know in the chat right now and in the comments, what does Valtteri Bottas have to do to keep his seat at Mercedes for 2020? Let us know in the chat right now and in the comments, and we will get through as many as we can. And let me just take a look and see what you guys think about what Bottas has to do. And it is also, I'll say this is Bottas's most important season in his career, because if he gets dropped, I don't really see where he can go.
Williams?
Maybe, but if Russell stays there and Ocon goes to Mercedes and Kubica does enough to keep his seat, then we'll see. I think he will stay in F1, but I don't know where.
He's definitely good enough to be in F1.
Yeah,
if
there's
he's
no
not
doubt.
on the grid for 2020, then that's more of an outrage than, Ocon not being on the grid for this year, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
If he's not on the grid for 2020, that'd be amazing if he's not on the grid for 2020.
Yeah, in a bad way, of course.
Yes, of course, in a bad way. And says he has to be competitive with Hamilton. Simple as that. Will F1, if we can get on Rosberg's level with Hamilton, then that is good enough. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Not going to happen.
If he can, what he needs to do is he needs to just... I thought about this last night when I was setting the stream up. He needs, when it comes to his mentality, he needs to adopt the Kimi Räikkönen mid-2000s mentality of racing. If you go back and look at what Kimi Räikkönen was doing around that time, basically in the races, he would give it absolutely everything he had. And when it came to overtaking, he was basically like, I'm coming through, there's nothing you're going to do about it. And, he was just pushing. That's what Bottas has to do. Just have a, I don't care type of mentality. I'm coming through. And he needs to act more Finnish, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He needs to be a bit more Kimi Räikkönen, Mika Häkkinen like with his mentality. Just a bit of, I don't want to say it because I'll be swearing, but no bleeps given. I think everyone knows what I mean by that. Jeffrey Guyot says Bottas. He says bottle, but I think he means Bottas. Bottas has to be at least competitive or compete at about 75% of Rosberg's level. Yeah. Again, if the car is as quick as it was last season, he needs to win. If he does have a lot better luck, he needs to have, say, 3 race wins, in my opinion. 3 to 4, and that should be enough if he couples that with 8 or 9 podiums along with that. Halam says Valtteri to IndyCar. I hope not. I really hope not. Right, let me find a couple more. Then I will move on to something else before we get onto the Q&A to end the podcast. Willafon says Bottas just needs to step up. I really hope he does, even if Hamilton still beats him. Even if Bottas improves, Hamilton is going to beat him. Hamilton is clearly better. But, yeah. He needs to just be, as Nib said, closer to Hamilton. Not necessarily beat Lewis Hamilton, just be closer to Hamilton. Say, if Hamilton wins the race, be in second place. Or if Hamilton finishes second, be in third. Just be, say, one position behind so you can collect the points for the team. And then maybe, I don't know, at 3 or 4 of the races, beat Hamilton. That should be enough. Something like that. NN says Hamilton is a slow starter. Bottas needs to come out all guns blazing. I hope he does. I really hope he does. That'd be great to see. Right, let me find one more and then we'll move on. Someone's got a great comment there. Tonka Toy Truck. Ask Verline about promises. Exactly. And he also says Mercedes-Benz needs a junior team and the sport needs more cars on the grid. I don't get why they didn't buy out Manor and make it a junior team. Because Ocon would have been on the grid this season with probably Pascal Verline still at that team, if not moved on, and then maybe Russell in that team. I don't get why they didn't buy out Manor. They really should have. Right. I think now we'll move on from that topic. It was very good to do. And I think we have said enough when it comes to Bottas. But before we go on to the Q&A, I just want to ask Nib, but ask the chat. What are our thoughts of the new Haas livery, say, 2 days after? Do we think it's any better? It's any worse? In my opinion, the more I look at it, the worse it gets. I don't think it's that good looking of a car. I think the people saying it's amazing they're overrating it. It's a black car with some gold on it. If even saying some gold is a bit of an overstatement. But I'll show this side image. It's not really that good of a car. It's just a black car with some gold writing on it. It's not that good. Nib, does it get better or worse for you the more you look at it?
Well, as I've said, to you personally, it's shit. It's awful. I sent to you that image, right, of where it has the Haas logo in gold and then the gold stripe above it. And how much better does it look?
Just a lot better.
The white Haas ruins it definitely side on. You know, from the front it's actually okay, but from side on it just looks bland and boring with that white generic Haas. So hopefully they change it to gold or something. Listen to the fans. So yeah, still not liking it any more than what I was the other day, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's not that good. I don't get what people see in it. It's a black car with, again, gold writing on it. That Haas logo should be gold. All the writing on it should be gold, really. Maybe I don't think they can make. Can they make the wheels gold? I don't think they can. But they should have got a lot more gold with this car. It's not a good looking car in my opinion. It's not going to be a car that's going to stand out to me when I go to testing, hopefully, for the second preseason test. And I'm sure for you, Nib, when you go to the first Grand Prix, it's not going to be something that you're like, wow, when it goes around the corner, unless it looks like a Red Bull when it goes through the corner in terms of cornering speed. But the looks of it, it's not an eye catcher. It's not what it should have been. And I think they have to take some responsibility when it comes to building up how good it was supposed to look. Because they were basically teasing a Lotus. And they gave us at best, Lotus at 25%. So, yeah, I don't like it. I really don't like it. Again, the more I look at it, the worse it gets. But, good news, we have 2 reveals on Monday, which I'll get on to. You know what? I'll just switch to this screen. Yeah, guys, in the chat right now, put your questions in, and for the next 10 minutes, I think, we'll answer some. I just want to let you guys know right now of the content schedule for next week and also tomorrow. So tomorrow, this week in F1 at the moment is not going to happen tomorrow because there's not enough news out there for me to do one. If there is one more story which I take an interest in, I will do it tomorrow at 3 p.m. UK time. But right now, as it stands, it's not going to happen tomorrow, unfortunately, because there's not enough news. But then, next week, we have car reveal after car reveal after car reveal after car reveal. So Monday, Toro Rosso are revealing their car at 1:30 p.m. UK time. And then Williams are revealing their livery, most likely their car as well, at, is it 3 p.m. UK time? Nib? I don't know if it's 3 or 4 p.m. UK time, but if it is 3 p.m. UK time, then I will be going live at about 3:30 p.m. UK time on Monday afternoon / early evening, of course. And we're going to look at and go through the new Toro Rosso car and the new Williams livery, possibly car as well. Then on Tuesday, you've got the Renault livery, the Renault car reveal. Then on Wednesday, we have Mercedes, Red Bull, and Racing Point. Now, Mercedes' car reveal is at 9 a.m. UK time. They're doing a shakedown at Silverstone. Red Bull have not announced when they are revealing their car time-wise, but it is on the 13th of February. Again, 13. They tried that on in 2017. Didn't exactly work for them, did it? Then you have Racing Point, who are doing a reveal at I think it's the Toronto Motor Show or something like that. And that's at 3 p.m. UK time. So for that day, we're probably going to do 2 streams. One for Mercedes and then one for Red Bull and Racing Point on that day. But we'll have to see what time Red Bull go for revealing their car. Hopefully, it's around the same time as Mercedes, so we can do Mercedes and Red Bull in the same stream. Then on Thursday, you have McLaren at, what time was McLaren? I think 12 or 1 p.m. UK time. So we'll be live around lunchtime on Thursday. And then Ferrari are revealing their car at 9:45. That's 9:45 a.m. UK time. And then we'll be live, well, for that car reveal, we'll be live probably around 10:30 or 11 a.m. UK time to look at the new Ferrari. Then on Saturday, we're going to do the live podcast again. Next week's podcast is going to be me and Nib previewing pre-season and looking ahead for all the teams, what they need to do and stuff like that. And then next Sunday, there most likely won't be a This Week in F1 because next week's news is going to be car reveals, which we're going to cover anyway. So there won't be a This Week in F1 next Sunday. I will say, though, for you guys wondering, because I have done, if you haven't seen, I've done a pre-season preview for Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. The midfield one is now, instead of it being Renault, McLaren, and Racing Point, what I've done now is basically I'm going to combine all of the rest of the teams. So that's Renault, Racing Point, McLaren, Williams, Haas, Sauber, and Toro Rosso. I'm going to do all of them in one video. That video will be released sometime during next week, most likely on Thursday or Friday next week. And yeah, that's pretty much it for next week. And again, if you don't know, guys, unfortunately, I can't go to the first test because of some quite serious personal issues in my personal life. So I can't go to the first test, but I'm hoping to be going to the second test, which is the 26th of February to the 1st of March. Now, when it comes to what I'm going to do for the pre-season reviews of each day for the first test, I will let you guys know about that in next week's podcast. I'll let you guys know when it comes to that. Yeah, that's what we're going to be doing on the channel next week. And hopefully you can join us for plenty of content next week. We're going to be uploading on every day except for Sunday next week. Plenty of videos coming your way, so I cannot wait to get doing that. But for about 10 minutes, I am now going to read out some questions and answer them. Right, let me take a look. Will F1, what do you think the Williams livery will be like? I think it will be blue. Maybe dark blue, but I think it'll be blue. We'll have to see though. I think though it will be blue. Mario Master, did you see the new Toro Rosso race suits? Looks like the livery might be going a bit darker. Yes, I did. Yeah, I think they will have a darker tone with that livery, but we'll have to see, of course. And asks me and Nib, who do you think will have the faster car in 2019, Mercedes or Ferrari, and why? I think it'll be Mercedes because I think these regulations suit Mercedes more, because one weakness of the Mercedes car that is going to be not completely solved, but it is going to be helped, is the cleaning up of the aerodynamics on the front wing of the car, because Mercedes probably are the worst on the grid for following another car in the dirty air. So if that is improved, that will help them when it comes to racing other cars, and just generally being better. And if you look at 2014 to 2016, we had simpler front wings and Mercedes were very good. So yeah, I'm going to say Mercedes. I think Ferrari will be there, but I don't think as a team they are ready to win the championship. Nib, who do you think will have the faster car and why out of Mercedes and Ferrari?
Well, I think Ferrari will. I think they'll build upon the great car which they had that last year. Obviously, the regulations are different. You know, you don't have to point that out to me. I'm well aware, but I think Ferrari had really did step up their game in 2018, and I only see them getting better in 2019, even though they did bottle it in every way, shape possible in 2018. I do think in 2019 though they will have the fastest car. Obviously, we will see come in a week and a bit, come the first pre-season test.
Yeah, we'll see how Ferrari are looking during testing. Will F1 says Mercedes should go with a black and silver livery. That would look good. Now, I just want to ask, I don't have it ready, unfortunately. Actually, hold on a minute. I think I might have it ready. I just want to show something that... let me try and find it. Ultraman Nexus, if he is listening, he put this in the Discord. I don't think I can. But if you guys have seen the apparent new livery for the Mercedes car, I think it's a testing livery. But if they go for that livery, have you seen it, Niv? This blue and...
yeah, of course.
If they go for that livery, I will be horrified. It is the most awful thing I've seen. It is horrific. It is absolutely horrific. I would honestly hope that they don't win the championship, because it would be the ugliest car to ever win a championship. If they have that livery, then surely not. Come on. Surely they're not going to have that livery. Oh, come on. I'm hoping they don't. If they say this is our livery for the season, then I'm probably just going to tear into them after the car reveal. Mario Master says, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it's so bad. I know I think Autosport posted like a CGI render of what they think it will look like if it is their testing livery or overall car livery. if that is their livery for the whole season, there needs to be like a petition to put it back to what it was like. Because I know the dark silver Mercedes car, I know it's not that good looking, but it's way better than that. Way better. Oh my. Let's hope. Let's hope.
This is what happens when you think you're Red Bull.
Exactly. I'm hoping it is just a testing livery. I'm hoping it is only that.
I'm pretty sure it just will be a testing livery. Don't worry. You need to calm down there.
Please. Honestly, I cannot bear to look at that for 21 races.
That certainly would catch my eye. When
Yeah.
Grand Prix.
Yeah, that'll catch your eye, yeah. Do you know what it looks like? I know they're the same team as what came before them. Do you remember the Honda Earth car?
Yes.
It looks like the Honda Earth car, and by the way, they used to be Honda. So
yeah, of course, the team out Brackley, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they're copying that. Oh, please.
It's been reincarnated.
Yeah. Oh my. Let's hope they don't go for that. Right. Let me read out a few more. Hold on a minute. Halam899 asks, which driver do you think is the dark horse of 2019? Oh, that's actually one I haven't thought of. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I'll have to think about that properly. Who is the dark horse for the season? Do you have one there? But I can't think of one.
Kimi Räikkönen.
And by the way, was it you who sent it me that article about Simone Resta trying some innovative things on the Alfa Romeo?
Yes, it was.
I know there's a certain person on Twitter that I follow, and also he comments regularly, called Crystal Racing. He's a massive Kimi Räikkönen fan, and is now a massive Alfa Romeo fan. If that car is, if they do like not a brawn, I think that's a bit extreme, but if they really jump up and are competitive, then I can't wait for the season to get going, because that would be amazing to see if they were right up there and say the top 6 or 7 on the grid. Yeah, that would be wow. And of course, Tony Resta designed the 2018 Ferrari, and look how good that car was. I know the power unit had a lot to do with it, but the aerodynamics were a lot better than the 2017 car. So.
And they arguably fell apart once his influence was shaped off of the car.
Yes, of course, because he left to go to, at the time, Sauber to help them out, and now is basically the designer of the Alfa Romeo car. Yeah. We'll have to see. That'll be interesting to see if they turn up and are suddenly quick. And by the way, if you think that I forgot to mention the Alfa Romeo car reveal, they're doing it on the first day of testing, their car reveal. So I will talk about it after or in my day 1 of testing review. I won't do a separate stream or anything like that. I'll just review it in that. Right. With F1, imagine this. Raikkonen wins 2019 title at 40 years old. That would be incredible if we had a brawn-like season and it was Kimi who came out on top. That would be amazing. Just trying to look for some more. We're probably going to come to an end in a moment because we have been on quite a while. Coming up to 2 hours and 12 minutes. So I will come off in a moment. Will F1, I doubt Mercedes will actually have that livery. I hope so. I really hope so, but you never know. They could go for a Honda Earth Dreams 2007. That'd be terrible though if they did that. But I'm not seeing any more questions, so I think I'm just going to end it there. Nib, thanks for coming along and talking about Valtteri Bottas for 2 hours. And yeah, can't wait for next week where we have plenty of car reveals and hopefully you'll be able to join me for that.
Indeed, I will be with you during those streams during the week for the car reveals. And McLaren's launch is at 12, is at midday GMT time. So
Okay.
I didn't hear you quite read that out, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, thank you once again to everyone who joined the stream, and thank you to everyone who contributed to the conversation. And of course, big thanks to Chazza, because if he was not here, neither would any of us. So I hope you'll have a good evening, guys.
Yep, thanks for coming on and thanks for that compliment as well. But yeah, guys, that is it for the podcast. Thanks for coming along and talking about Bottas and also other things, the Haas livery and stuff like that. Has been good as always. And again, guys, when it comes to tomorrow and a possible This Week in F1 episode, I will let you guys know in the community tab on my YouTube channel page and also on Twitter. I will put a message in there saying this is going to happen or this won't happen or, you know, something like that. So I will let you guys know. So don't worry about that. I will let you know probably early-ish tomorrow morning because I'm going to look at the news tonight and see if anything comes through that I can actually do a stream on. So I'll have a look. And if there is something, I'll do a stream. But if there isn't, I won't. But yeah, I'll let you guys know. But yeah, thanks for coming along, guys, for the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. We do the podcast every weekend. There's not an F1 race, so don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. On the bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or click on my channel name, go to the channel page, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell. Like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and what you think Valtteri Bottas has to do to keep his seat at Mercedes for 2020. And as well, don't forget to join the Discord server. Best way to get notifications for my videos is the Discord server, so don't forget to join that. Link is in the description. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110 and check out my website ChazzaHDF1 for more content like this. But guys, until the next podcast, which is next week, previewing pre-season, and until the next video and stream, which is likely to be on Monday, looking at the new Toro Rosso and the new Williams, it's been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.